टैंकर्स नहीं भेज पा रहे हैं, जो टैंकर्स आ रहे हैं वो कुछ लोगों को दे रहे हैं, सबको नहीं दे पा रहे। सेकेंडली, टैंकर्स के पास पाइप्स नहीं है। अब हर इंसान यहाँ पाइप नहीं खरीद सकता ना।
A car rammed into a motorcycle rider in Uttar Pradesh's Sambhal district. The police have launched an investigation into the matter.
The video shows a motorcycle rider being hit hard by a car and then dragged for a few meters before getting up immediately. Despite the horrific incident, the motorcyclist had suffered minor injuries. After the video went viral on social media, the police has launched an investigation into the entire matter.
Meanwhile, thousands of CPIM workers protested against Kerala Governor Arif Mohammed Khan. The party protested till the Raj Bhavan. In fact, the ruling CPIM and the governor have been at loggerheads over allegations of nepotism by government officials in the appointment of vice-chancellors to universities. The issue intensified after the Supreme Court annulled the appointment of a vice-chancellor of one of the technical universities in Kerala.
The Left Democratic Front has taken out a protest march from outside the museum compound to Raj Bhavan, protesting against the stand taken by Kerala Governor. Hundreds of workers have gathered here under the LDF. All their allies, the CPM, CPI, all of them are taking part in this. They have
Hello everyone, you're watching News Epicenter with me, Maria Shakil. The gruesome killing of 26-year-old Shraddha in New Delhi continues to haunt the nation. 6 months ago, she was murdered by her partner Aftab, who chopped her body into 35 pieces allegedly and scattered them in the Mehrauli Chhatrapur forest area over 18 days. Police sources close to the investigation say Aftab and Shraddha fought over household affairs on the night of 18th of May. Aftab lost his temper and strangled Shraddha between 8 and 10 p.m. Shraddha's body was in Aftab's room all night. A day later, on May 19th, Aftab bought a fridge online and tools to hack her body into pieces. This is what the investigators are saying based on the confession of Aftab. And then he secretly disposed of her body and possessions over the next few weeks. CNN News 18 has also learned that Aftab tried to cover up his tracks by operating Shraddha's social media and bank accounts for days after killing her to throw off any suspicion. He also continued to date other women, even bringing them home while Shraddha's body parts were in the fridge. Shraddha's father has broken his silence. He told News 18 that Shraddha was fed up with Aftab as he repeatedly assaulted and harassed her. He says she tried to break up with him twice, but she wasn't in touch with the family as they opposed the relationship. The Saket court today allowed the police to conduct a narco test on Aftab. The police may also conduct a psychoanalysis test soon to decode his mental state. Meanwhile, a forensic analysis of Aftab's cell phone and laptop is underway to retrieve his chats with Shraddha and other women. For the last 2 days, Delhi police has been retracing Aftab's steps in the forests of Chhatarpur to recover Shraddha's remains and searching their home for slam dunk evidence. For now, the only thing tying Shraddha's death to Aftab is his confession. This still leaves a question mark over conviction and the testament of this crime as the rarest of the rare case, as a confession means nothing legally until it is backed by hard evidence. And what if Aftab changes his confession in the court? And that's where the challenge lies.
On May 18th, during one such fight that turns violent suddenly, this man loses his temper, and it was somewhere around between 8 to 10 p.m. that this man kind of attacks Shraddha and strangles her to death.
Yesterday, the team of Delhi police brought Aftab over here, and Aftab yesterday pointed out a few places that he claimed that he had thrown the body parts of Shraddha after killing her on May 18th.
They claimed they were husband and wife. Was effort made to really verify this claim? The documents that have been accessed by CNN News 18 on your television screens, in which this was the document that they gave for police verification, in which they claimed that they were husband and wife. Anwar Shrivastava is joining me live and he will give us the details. So, was there a marriage certificate that was attached to this police verification form, Anwar?
Yes, see, this verification form has come to fore, and now the police are trying to find out. Even in fact, Delhi police that is probing this case, entire case, they are getting in touch with Mumbai police and trying to find out, corroborate the facts that appear from the Mumbai's the documents that we have just shown on screen. So in Delhi also, the landlord has been contacted and he has been asked to, he has been summoned and to appear before the police to join the investigation, because one interest. So it had already been almost a year and a half that they had been living together, but Shraddha had been often telling her parents and friends that this man physically assaults her and that their relationship is not going as good as she had supposed it to be. So these things are also being looked into by Delhi police, and the tenants, the landlord, along with many others who are linked to this entire case, have also been summoned to join for questioning.
All right, Anwar, thank you so much. And Rajat Shukla, who is Shraddha's friend, is also joining us live.
Revelation now made by Aftab. I mean, something new coming. With regards to the shades that Aftab had. So Aftab, truly is a person I think is coming with surprises, and this person. Is trying to fool people, making stories. And one of it is this.
Wise to break out of this relationship, then why didn't any of her friends support her then? Help her to break that cycle?
So they did. So there was this incident where Shraddha had told her best friend that Aftab, he literally burns her back with the cigarette burns. So that is one revelation that recently a friend from our group did. Certainly a lot more secrets was trying to hide these things from people.
Rajat, stay with us because there are several sides to this case, as we have been saying. And let's get you an overview of the missing links in the case as it stands, and then I bring in the experts. There has been no recovery of the sharp tool that was used to allegedly chop up the body. Remember, Aftab has claimed that he chopped the body of Shraddha into 35 pieces. Aftab has told the cops that he threw away the tool, the murder weapon, near Dhan Mill. The cops are yet to recover that murder weapon. There has been no recovery of the backpack used to carry the body parts, which he did over 18 days that he has claimed. Aftab has told the cops be able to recover it. There has been no recovery of Shraddha's clothes or possessions. So that certainly is a matter of concern as far as the evidence building effort of the cops is concerned. Aftab told the cops that he dumped her things in a garbage truck. So it may be very well that evidence has vanished completely. And there is no forensic evidence from the fridge where the body parts were stored. There has been no recovery of Shraddha's phone. The call data records, as per law, is only circumstantial evidence. And hence, this entire case so far hinges on forensic evidence, and that's where the challenges are also before the authorities. So what are the challenges that the authorities are facing on the forensic side of this entire investigation? Blood traces have been picked from the kitchen slab and sink, but forensic evidence is being collected months after the murder, and that is where the biggest challenge is. No murder weapon. All efforts have been made by Aftab to really clean up the scene of crime, and hence all this evidence is being collected several months after it. Remember, the murder happened on May 18th. And there are multiple concerns, particularly over contamination of collected samples. Let me get all the guests who are joining me now. Dr. Jayanti Datta is a clinical psychologist. Yashwardhan Azad is a former IPS officer. We have Trisha Shetty, social activist. Alok Srivastav is advocate on record of the Supreme Court. And Rajat continues to be with us. Mr. Azad, I'm going to begin with you. How will the cops corroborate all those claims that have been made by Aftab here, that include
fashion? I mean, the entire sequence of events which form a real chain of circumstantial evidence clearly lead us to believe that he's planned everything. The way he took the house in Chhatarpur Pahadi area, the way he moved from Bombay to this particular place, the way from fights to fights he was becoming more and more cruel. See, there are three parts of this crucial evidence, and I'm very positive that Delhi police is on the right track. Number one is the circumstantial evidence, which I've been talking about, which is overwhelming. The friends have talked about how she was behaving. The friends have talked about of how she had reacted and communicated with them. The last seen by the neighbors in this particular place. The second is the criminal intent, the mens rea, which is clearly revealed by so much of evidence where the surgical gloves to the kind of chemicals he has used to wipe out the traces of blood, etc. And third is the hard physical evidence which we are talking about, which has also been mentioned in your report about something found on the table, the blood traces. And I think the most important would be the DNA sampling. Now, mind you, the DNA sampling, which is done in 4 stages, and today, even DNA sampling after 25 or 30
test of the court. We are looking at the evidence which is related in the sense that circumstances in the case, there is indirect evidence, not clear direct evidence, but the absence of the murder weapon. And whenever there has been circumstantial evidence in the past, I'll try and get details on that in just a bit. Jessica Lal case and other cases, we have seen what
confessional statement alone, as we all know, is inadmissible as an evidence in the court of law, unless it is corroborated by the clinching evidences. In this case, as you have very rightly pointed out, the head of the deceased has not been found. The DNA profiling, obviously, that is going to take place. The weapon which was used in the offense, that has not been recovered. Till now, no clinching evidence as such has been recovered. And 6 months or 4 or 5 months have already passed since the commission of the crime. So definitely it is going to be very challenging for the Delhi police. It is not going to be a smooth journey for Delhi police. And we must all remember, apart from Jessica Lal case and other cases which you talked about, there is a very recent case of Kiran Negi, in which, because there were glaring lapses,
we saw what happened
in the prosecution, in the trial, and Supreme Court had to acquit the rapists who were given death penalty by the
trial court
and the High Court. So we need to understand that
from you, and then I bring in other panelists.
First of all, there is no relevance to this Negi case. There's a huge lot of things which need to be said of the Negi case, which has no comparison. Number two, finding the skull does not mean any kind of recognition or anything like that. Here we are talking about DNA sampling is much, much more accurate. And as far as the weapon of offense is concerned, we don't even know whether it was strangulation or after murder, then she was cut up with pieces like that. And therefore, the clinching evidence has to be of 3 kinds. One is the hard evidence by DNA sampling, the other is the mens rea, and the third is the
And the mens rea here is established. The motive is clear. He wanted her dead. But why? Do we know that, Yashwardhan Azad?
My point is only this, that the Delhi police needs to put a lot of efforts. It has to learn from its own mistakes, and it has to ensure that the culprit of this barbaric crime must be hanged till death, and
Jayanti Datta, here is someone who is a hardened criminal. If the cops are clearly saying that he is changing his statement repeatedly, there is compulsive lie that he is indulging in. He is also accepted to the crime, and the entire case is based on his confession statement. The point that it is he who said told the cops that he chopped her into 35 pieces. The fact is that there is, imagine his state of mind when he actually goes and throws the phone away so that he is not traced back. He continues to engage with her friends through Instagram and other social media platform. Also operates the bank account for days after killing her to throw off any suspicion. Here is someone, then when we look at this kind of mind, what do you think the narco analysis really will achieve?
See, narco is probably not admissible even in the court. The one thing which one has to see, he is, now I'm happy that they've gone to the landlord, they have established that he had taken the house on rent, even if it were Versailles or Mumbai, that they are credit card. Credit card was still with him after he disposed of the body, right? If somebody who brings in an adult female and says in sequence, he gives you the description that yes, we were fighting, yes, we were moving around together, yes, I used to have fights with her. Now there were some interviews I saw where the neighbors came up and said they were asked not to intervene. They have heard. I heard an interview of an elderly lady who said some kind of a stench used to come, burnt stench used to come. Now these are, if they are corroborated, why would not we have some legal fraternities who can really clinch these together and prove that this was indeed a heinous crime. Now credit card aspect, if it is not a crime, then what it is.
Rohit, since he did get in touch with some of her friends through social media, do we know which friend we are looking at, and what was it that Aftab was telling Shraddha's friends? She was dead, but he was operating her social media accounts. Rajat?
There was a gap between the communication, and that gap how at the confusion.
So he was in touch with 3 of her friends, Trisha. That's what we are looking at in terms of this level of depravity in this toxic relationship. We certainly would want swiftest and strictest punishment against him for what clearly is the rarest of the rare crime. Trisha.
That goes without saying. I think the law that even sometimes after years that is spent trying to get a conviction, then when the person is in jail, they will often come out on bail, they will often come out on parole, and then their sentence is dropped. Even if they get sentenced to death, then it gets reduced to life imprisonment, and then the life imprisonment sentence then just gets reduced to parole and bail often, where they're often seen with, threatening witnesses, threatening family members of survivors, and then they just get let go on good behavior. So this is the climate that we're in, where criminals get hardened because they think they can get away with crime. And also the fact that you highlighted, it's not just the guarantee of strictest punishment, it's the guarantee of swift and assured justice. That is the only deterrent for such crimes. The only way we can stop these crimes from occurring in the future, where women are not subject to this kind of brutality and horror, is if there is a fear of the law, if a criminal actually thinks, should I commit this crime, I will actually be subject to justice, I will actually be arrested within a short period of time, and I will not see the light of day. Unfortunately, people, because of what they see on the news all the time,
that fear is gone. Look at what happened in the Jessica Lal case. The convict here, Manu Sharma, is out every now and then on parole. Why is circumstantial evidence such a tricky factor when it comes to prosecuting such cases? Let me give you some details of high-profile cases from the past where circumstantial evidence in fact played a crucial role. In the Jessica Lal case, on February 21st in 2006, the court acquitted 9 accused, including Manu Sharma, citing lack of evidence. But the same year, on December 18th, the High Court then convicted Manu Sharma, Vikas Yadav and Amardeep Singh Gill. Then there is the Priyadarshini Mattu case. On December 3rd, in 1999, the trial court acquitted Santosh Singh, citing lack of evidence. 7 years later, she had to wait very, very long for justice. 7 years later, on the October court acquitted Talwar, citing lack of evidence. That is the big question. That's what I'm asking you, Yashwardhan Azad, this lack of evidence that is cited by the court and acquittals happen.
Well, let me tell you that one of the cases which was cited of Negi's case, I don't see any investigation lapses. You know, the Supreme Court had talked about the lapses at the prosecution level, at the courts level, and also at the police level. In this particular case, as I see it, yes, the investigation has started much later because the reporting was late. And therefore, what has been done so far is on the right track. The first is that we are having a DNA sampling evidence, which is a clinching evidence. If you have that, you don't need skulls or anything else. If you prove that it is Shraddha's case, and if you have the blood on the table also, that is another very, very smart evidence which you get.
Okay, so Yashwardhan Azad, what will be the role of psychoanalysis, likes of Jayanti Datta in this case?
I'll tell you. You see, narco test may be illegal in the view of the Supreme Court. But you see, for investigation purposes in criminal cases, it has been allowed.
Yes.
And in Kasab case, for example, it gave a detailed explanation of the course of evidence which is followed. And therefore, the police will gain a lot by getting this narco analysis and psychoevaluation.
Okay. So, Dr. Jayanti Datta, decode the mind of this criminal for us.
Yes. See, forensic hypnosis is used abroad. One can use it here also. Now, what happens is these are the people, these kind of criminals plan it at their subconscious level. And, if the interrogation is subtle, if it is done properly, I'm sure the disjointed things, the statements. See, these kind of criminals are compulsive liars. He is not going to stick to one statement. The best way to find out the psychopathic persona of his is to interview the parents of his, the father. What was he like a child? What all did he do in the school days?
I'll just add
what
a bit.
Did he do
what
in
cops
the college
have told
days?
me, I spoke to one of the cops who is involved in the investigation, and the version that came to me was that the father said that the son was an independent, free-spirited boy. They did not know where he was working, what was the nature of his job. All they knew was that he was working in Bombay, in Delhi, when he moved to Delhi. Yes, go ahead.
Now, it confirms. It confirms that he's been secretive. He used to be secluded and he was given the umpteen freedom to do whatever he wanted. So that is one of the tricks, which confirms my hunch that he is a psychopathic person. And now to see that, he has carried it out and 6 months, 7 months have passed by. He is confident that nobody is going to catch him. So he will keep on changing the statements. But the DNA, which my predecessors has been repeatedly saying, these are the ones, the DNA and the fact that the sequential narration by the perpetrator that he was staying with her, he had bought a fridge, he had chopped off the body. Yesterday also I raised it that, where did he chop it? You can't keep a dead body for chopping purposes in the toilet. Such a small house, where did he keep it? And of course, the most important thing, the instrument which he bought, you have found where he brought the fridge from, but you should find where he purchased the instrument with which he chopped off the body. Now, the amazing thing, he disposed of the intestines and the liver first. Why? To take this out, what chemicals he had bought, how he knew. I refuse to believe that he just dependent on the feedback from or learning from internet. There has to be some advisors somewhere. I'm happy that the landlord's been tracked.
So you are of the opinion that there is an
accomplice. You have gone to the place where
accomplice of Aftab we don't know about.
Of course, yes. Yes, certainly yes. And this is where the police has to be very, very careful.
Okay, Alak seems to be disagreeing. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with what ma'am said. I just want to add on three very, very important aspects. One thing is very clear that accused had no fear of law. He had no fear of law. He was not at all scared or afraid that he'll be caught.
They don't have.
And the kind of
They don't
brilliance
have.
he has shown. Now, kindly give me 30 seconds. Kindly give me 30 seconds.
Yes,
I want to just give 3 bullet points. What is required now? This case must be, as a case study, it should be a learning for all of us as a society, as a law and justice system, etc. First is for our government and for the society. We need to ensure that our daughters are protected. This should act as a deterrent, the kind of punishment which should be given.
Yes,
Every
absolutely.
government agency should
I
work
have
with
just
lot of
enough
alertness
time
in
because
this
I
case.
need to get a first-hand account of what was happening in that relationship.
Punishment part.
Just two more
punishment part.
points.
But I'm
Just
going
two
to
more
continue
points.
because this is something
Can I
is
say
not,
1 second?
the discussion is not
The
ending.
punishment.
Rajat, I want to understand from you. You were giving me details that there were some friends that that Aftab was in touch with, and that's what even police is saying, that he continued to operate her social media account. So what was he telling friends of Shraddha?
So initially, people were not informed that Shraddha is lost. So the murder happened in May, and Aftab continued messaging people till July. So that's like almost more than 2 months. So he was messaging randomly to people. However, the closest of the closest friends, they certainly had got the doubt that it's not Shraddha but somebody else using it. They had actually written in the message, there was one friend, but they are not really allowing me to reveal their identity. But one person has said that he had messaged Shraddha after seeing a very different kind of a reply from her that where are you and are you safe?
And then what was the response to that question? Are you safe?
Yeah, and then there was no reply. So that certainly made a question much bigger than what it actually was.
So her friend got suspicious, but then Aftab would randomly just message any of the friends saying what? What was he trying to tell them?
So, as far as I understand, there are a lot of things that are a little away from me, but still, as far as what I understand, Aftab was trying to reply and not really communicate. He was trying to reply few people. However, much in my information, that was only one person who had actually received a reply from Aftab, apparently acting as Shraddha, and those communications were actually recognizable to that person that it's not Shraddha but somebody else talking on her behalf.
And what about her bank account? Do you have details? Because we have been told that it is certainly that transaction of 54,000 rupees that happened from Shraddha's account. The money was transferred from her account to Aftab's account. That was seen as the clincher that changed the direction of this entire investigation. Do we know much? Do you know about it? Did he come across as someone who was using her money?
Well, I think from the start itself, since 2019, the much we were knowing about Aftab was all bad things. And he always had stories, one story to cover the other.
Okay.
And then he used to do some ruckus, and then he had stories to cover the other. Now, after communicating with a lot of other friends, I'm getting to know a lot about Aftab as to how cruel, how dangerous this person actually looked like to friends already. However, there was something that I am quoting is that blackmailing that I think Aftab was doing, because of which Shraddha still continued to stay with him in spite such violent behavior, such life-threatening comments, and continuously doing things that are not to be done in a relationship. And a girl like Shraddha, she was very, very independent, and a person would, the person like her would not stay with a person who would be toxic to her or disturbing to her. She was very blunt to even speak out anything. These all stories that are coming out from Aftab seems impossible to me. And let me tell you one thing. Shraddha was almost 5 feet, around 6 inches tall, and it was not easy. She used to literally pull us boys. She used to pinch us, and she was strong. I tell you, she was not so weak that a guy like Aftab was no bodybuilder. That Aftab could pull off doing the murder all alone. It looks absolutely impossible.
All right, Rajat, thanks for sharing those details. Dr. Jayanti Datta, Yashwardhan Azad, Risha Shetty, and Alak Alok Srivastav, thank you so much. We'll continue to track that story very, very closely. Several details are continuing to emerge from both the police in Mumbai and in Delhi. We are slipping into a short break. Coming up, as Prime Minister Narendra Modi gives a message of unity at G20, tensions are on the rise amidst the Russia-Ukraine war after Poland is hit by a missile strike, killing 2 people. We'll get details when I return. Stay with us.
Behavior on any side with regard to this. So I think that the chances of escalation are pretty low.
Had this been actually a missile that was fired from Russia with intent or accidentally and then hit Polish territory, do you think NATO would have been forced to respond because of Article 5, which says that an attack on one is an attack on all?
No, I think that, look, the Russians, if you remember, shot down a Malaysian airliner, and it didn't produce any kind of, any calls for an attack on Russia. Look, there is a very important difference between an intentional launch and an accidental, not even a launch, but the straying of a missile, which appears to be exactly what happened here. I think that Poland might have called a meeting to convey the importance and the seriousness of this, partly because obviously when you lose your own people, you have to show that you care about it and you want to do something. But I don't think we're not in a world in which that an accidental launch would result in NATO declaring war on Russia.
It's going to be 9 months since this war began next week. What is your assessment of where things stand as of right now? Two questions that people are asking. One, who's winning this war? And two, when is it going to end?
Russia is without any question losing the war, by which I mean, if you ask yourself, what were Russia's objectives? Russia's objectives were to take Kyiv, to topple the Ukrainian government, to instill fear in all those Ukrainians who have supported this Ukrainian democratic government. All those objectives have not been met, and in fact, the Russian army has moved out of about 50 to 60% of the territory that they gained since February 24th. In other words, they've been pushed back, not quite to their February 24th positions, but to very close to those positions. They've also lost, as far as one can tell, almost half of their advanced armored equipment, tanks, armored vehicles, missiles, things like that. And there seem to be casualties that are approaching about 100,000. Now, these are guesses, but that seems to be the extent of the Russian loss. So it's very difficult to see how this can be painted in any way as a Russian victory. Now, on the other hand, Ukraine is a much, much smaller country than Russia. The Russian defense budget is 10 times the size of Ukraine's. So this is a David and Goliath story in which David is doing astonishingly well. But unlike in the biblical tale, David is unlikely to be able to vanquish or completely defeat or destroy Goliath. So what is most likely is that David will cause a kind of stalemate. The Ukrainians will force the Russians to be stuck in their core territories in the Donbass, probably in Crimea. And at that point, when you have a real stalemate where the Russians are not advancing, but the Ukrainians are finding it very hard to advance, that's when negotiations will begin. I think the Ukrainian government has made it clear that they are.
Welcome back. The 17th G20 summit in Bali has concluded. G20 leaders visited a forest in Bali to plant mangrove trees in a message of unity for climate action. Member nations also made a declaration to boost trade ties and anti-terror cooperation with India's diplomatic clout on display. As India takes over the presidency of the multilateral forum, Prime Minister Narendra Modi set the tone with the message, "One Earth, One Family, One Future."
G20 की अध्यक्षता का दायित्व इस पवित्र द्वीप बाली में ग्रहण कर रहे हैं। विश्व जियोपॉलिटिकल तनावों, आर्थिक मंदी, खाद्यान्न और ऊर्जा की बढ़ी हुई कीमतों और महामारी के दीर्घकालीन दुष्प्रभावों से एक साथ जूझ रहा है। भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता इंक्लूसिव, एम्बिशियस, डिसिसिव और एक्शन ओरिएंटेड होगी। नए विचारों की परिकल्पना के लिए और सामूहिक एक्शन को गति देने के लिए एक ग्लोबल प्राइम मूवर की तरह काम करे। भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता की थीम वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर में पूर्ण रूप से समाहित है।
But amidst the G20 meeting, for the first time since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, a NATO member has been hit. A Russian-made missile strayed into Poland and killed 2 Polish citizens. After initial alarm, both the US and NATO have said that this is likely a Ukrainian missile fired in self-defense, which hit Poland by mistake. But how real is the threat of escalation? This is a CNN News 18 special report.
It's the first confirmed case of the war in Ukraine having caused casualties in another country. This one was not on Ukrainian territory, where there's been a spurt in Russian missile strikes over the last 24 hours. Media reports said 2 Polish citizens were killed as a missile landed in a village in eastern Poland, 4 miles from the country's border with Ukraine. The Polish president came out to say that there's no sign yet that the hit was an intentional attack. Investigations continue. Not just another missile strike, because this one was in NATO territory. And the hit holds massive consequences arising out of what is potentially a vicious escalation of the Ukraine-Russia conflict.
An attack on all allies in that principle of collective defense. But there are indications emerging now that the US may be stepping back and taking NATO back from potentially a devastating confrontation directly on the ground with Russian forces.
As alarm buttons were pushed in Warsaw, tremors were felt at the G20 summit in Indonesia. G7 and NATO leaders got into a huddle as US President Joe Biden called an emergency meeting. Biden underscored support for Ukraine, even as he expressed strong doubts on the missile in Poland coming from Russia.
There is preliminary information that contests that. I don't want to say that till we completely investigate, but it's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia, but we'll see.
The Polish Foreign Ministry identified the missile as being made in Russia, but the Polish president was more cautious about its origin, saying that officials did not know for sure who fired it or when it was made. Russia rejects any hand in firing a missile into Poland. The Ukraine sees reason to claim Russia's deliberate bid to escalate the conflict.
Hitting missiles on NATO territory. This is Russian missile attack on collective security. This is a very significant escalation. We must act, and I want to say now to all our Polish brothers and sisters, Ukraine will support you. Terror will not break free people. Victory is possible when there is no fear. You and I don't have it.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called an emergency meeting of the alliance's envoys to discuss the events close to the Ukrainian border in Ukraine.
We have no indication that this was the result of a deliberate attack. And we have no indication that Russia is preparing offensive military actions against NATO.
It boils down to one factor. Where did the missile that hit Zewodo village in NATO member Poland come from? Theories raised range from it being a Russia missile fired into Ukraine, crossing over into Poland, or even that it was a Ukrainian warhead to counter Russia. All eyes on a definitive statement as mind-boggling fallouts are calculated.
Joining me now, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at ORF, and Dr. Sergey is President of IDC Russia and Director WHD International Board. Mr. Sareen, I'm coming to you. The Indian delegation played a big role in achieving consensus among member states over the wording criticizing the Russian invasion. The draft, in fact, echoes Prime Minister Narendra Modi's words to Vladimir Putin in Samarkand in September. Would you say that it has come to a point where India's position and stand is being heard by the world? The Prime Minister's words, of course, were, "Now is not the time for war."
You know, I think what the Prime Minister said was unexceptionable. I don't think anybody can really say that there was any problem in what the Prime Minister said. I don't think even the Russian president would have taken it as something out of the ordinary. In fact, he kind of agreed with the Prime Minister. But that position is very well taken. But what happened in the G20 was, some decent diplomacy from the Indian side to try and get some kind of a consensus. Because there were some countries which did not want an outright condemnation of Russia. That does not mean that they support the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It does not mean that they support the war, but it means that they feel that, a condemnation on a public platform is not very helpful from the point of view of diplomacy, if at all diplomacy has to play a role in trying to stop the war. So I think a kind of a middle ground was found where it was said that the formulation was that most of the countries kind of condemn Russia, but then, it's something like what happens in the SCO, that India does not agree with the BRI project of the Chinese. All other countries are ready to go with it. So they take out India from that thing and, the communique goes ahead. And I think something similar has happened this time around. So that is where matters stand. How helpful it will be in actually bringing the war to an end is another matter altogether.
That's right. And Dr. Sergey, the developments that have happened in Poland, which has the world concerned, I mean, was this just an accident or was there more to it? How is Russia viewing it? Was it just by mistake in self-defense as NATO members are looking at it?
First of all, we understand that the current situation with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, because Russia start with a space operation to protect Russian-speaking population of the eastern part of Ukraine. And as you know, that sometimes we cannot tell what is by mistake or how it was happened. But of course, it should be make some research about the situation, and after some
the
deep
US
research,
is saying that it is unlikely that it is Russia. They are looking at the facts. There are multiple versions that are coming in. Poland has said that it was an unfortunate accident, not an international attack. Then if this is the version that is coming from the ground, particularly Poland, who has lost, which has lost in fact 2 of its nationals, then do you think the war will escalate in that direction, or are you of the opinion that this was just, Ukrainian missile fired in self-defense, which hit Poland by mistake?
I can see that if we look smartly to this situation, we can understand that we have some players international perils on the current field, diplomatic field, and the geopolitical field. They're very interesting to escalate this conflict. Even Western countries, they're looking for all possibilities to blame our country and to make some bad image about our country. That's why I will be very careful with this situation, and that's why I can tell that it should be some deep research and some confirmation why it was happened. And in my opinion, we should be more peaceful and more smart and open to dialogue and to see what was behind this situation and who is most beneficial for this situation.
Okay, so Shansarin, I'm going to go back to G20 because, India has taken over the presidency now. Prime Minister Modi termed India as the global leader in financial inclusion and how India accounted for 40% of the world's real-time payment transactions, as well as used the CoWIN platform to carry out the world's biggest vaccination exercise against COVID. So when you look at the nature of the entire assertion that has come from the Prime Minister, many are seeing this as India's moment, and particularly coming at a time when we have taken over the chairmanship of G20.
Yeah, it in a way it is India's moment. I think that's undeniable because the G20 is a country, the 20 most powerful economic players in the world. And if you are the president of the G20 for this year, then it's an opportunity both for you to showcase yourself and your country, as well as to try and push the agenda forward, especially the kind of agenda which the Prime Minister has. He's talking about data for all, he's talking about inclusion, financial inclusion. But I think ultimately the test of the Indian presidency will be whether we can actually do something over what the Prime Minister said, that one, there is this looming global economic recession, and can India spearhead the G20's efforts to stabilize the global economy? And I don't say that, we have some kind of a magic wand, but at least try and give some kind of a direction to that so that this problem is sorted out or at least mitigated to the extent possible. And then, of course, there are the other considerations, the geopolitical tensions and, the climate change and all of that. Some of those are linked with, the economic recession, which is looming large. And some of those are going to be are exacerbating the economic recession. For example, the Russia-Ukraine war. But Maria, if you'll allow me just a sentence or two on what has happened, in Poland. I think, of course, investigation needs to be done, but just look at the kind of posturing which is being done by the three main players. The Russians are flatly denying that they had anything to do with that particular missile attack, right? Yes. The NATO and the West are being very, very cautious because they understand that if indeed this was a Russian missile which was fired into Poland, then you might just be looking at a much wider war, which nobody wants. I think NATO and the West is quite happy to see the Ukrainians fight the Russians. They'll keep supplying the Ukrainians. So it's, in a manner of speaking, a low-cost kind of a thing as far as they are concerned. But I think it's the Ukrainians, and I'm being a little cynical out here. Right from the time when the war started, President Zelensky has been trying to rope in NATO and the US and the other European countries into the war to fight on his behalf. He has been asking them to give him the air cover, which would have pitted them directly against the Russians and would have led to a wider war. So he has been actually pushing for it. And after yesterday's incident, while the NATO and the Americans and everybody else was playing it down, they were trying to calm things down, going into an investigation, Mr. Zelensky was actually pushing for everybody else to step into this war so that it becomes a wider war.
Okay.
I think somebody needs to tell Mr. Zelensky to lay off. Nobody wants a wider war. Nobody wants a third world war, certainly not in Europe, certainly not in Asia, because its destructive impact is going to be all across the globe. So I think one understands where Zelensky is coming from, but that does not mean that, you try and provoke everybody into some kind of a third world war. And which is why questions are also being raised, or at least
On
doubts
his
are being
reaction.
expressed, whether this was some kind of a false flag attack
Right.
to provoke a wider war.
All right. So, Shamsuddin and Dr. Sargir, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And our last international story on this bulletin, the race for the White House 2024 with former US President Donald Trump throwing his hat in the ring, while Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis is being seen as a potential challenger. I'm leaving you with this. I'll be seeing you tomorrow. Thanks so much.
America's comeback starts right now.
Former President Donald Trump announcing another bid for the presidency.
2 years ago, we were a great nation, and soon we will be a great nation again.
The twice impeached former president is aiming to be only the second commander-in-chief ever elected to 2 non-consecutive terms. Trump making the long-anticipated announcement in the wake of election losses from several of his endorsed candidates.
Much criticism is being placed on the fact that the Republican Party should have done better, and frankly, much of this blame is correct. But the citizens of our country have not yet realized the full extent and gravity of the pain our nation is going through, and the total effect of the suffering is just starting to take hold. They don't quite feel it yet, but they will very soon.
Given the GOP's midterm losses, some Republicans are wary of another Trump presidential bid. It is widely expected he'll face primary challengers. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is seen as one possible contender.
People to go check out the scoreboard from last Tuesday night. It was a hugely underwhelming, disappointing performance.
Another potential contender is his former Vice President Mike Pence.
I think we'll have better choices in the future.
President Biden, who has yet to announce whether he will seek re-election, tweeted after the announcement, quote, "Donald Trump failed America."
I believe I can beat Donald Trump again.
Trump's desire to announce his campaign early coming after the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago, which advisors say further emboldened his decision to mount what he believes will be a triumphant political comeback. Trump is the subject of a bevy of lawsuits and federal investigations, including his possible involvement in the January 6th Capitol attack. Trump is fighting a subpoena issued by the House Select Committee investigating January 6th over providing documents and testimony to the committee.
Without the Donbass, that's about 20% of Ukraine's territory. Russia has to accept that it is not going to get what it wanted. And then there can be a negotiation about how you describe places like Crimea and the Donbass. My guess is we'll have them as kind of frozen conflicts, a little bit like what has happened in Kashmir, when neither side recognizes the other, but kind of life goes on. But in order to do that, there needs to be a concerted effort to get the Russians on board. India is perfectly positioned to do it, and I think it really should take this opportunity.
And now that India is going to be the next president of the G20, it's going to be hosting the G20 summit this coming year as well. But just to round off this conversation on the war, and then we'll come to Donald Trump in a moment. What's the future looking like for Vladimir Putin? Because clearly, as you said, he's not winning this war. Can a Putin who's been defeated on the battlefield, or someone who has to settle for something less than what he started off with, would he be able to survive?
It's anybody's guess. It's a very closed system. It's a very personalistic system, Jacob. If you think about it, this is the most personalistic dictatorship in the world, by which I mean even Xi Jinping. If Xi Jinping were to die tomorrow, you know what happens. The Central Committee of the Communist Party the Standing Committee of the Politburo would get together, they'd vote. One of the 7 members would become the next. If in a monarchy, if King Salman were to die, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia becomes king. In other words, there is institutions and rules of succession organizations. What happens if Putin dies? Nobody knows. It is literally a country with nuclear weapons, with a veto in the Security Council, spanning 9 time zones, run by one person. So, we can't be sure. I think that my gut is that he will survive because he has created what he himself calls a vertical of power, which is so strong that it's very difficult to imagine even a military defeat dislodging him. Because who would replace him? Would it be a general? Would it be he's insulated himself from a lot of challenges. He's killed most of his political opponents or jailed them or exiled them.
Mhm.
The military is, as far as we can tell, firmly under his control. He has a presidential guard, by the way, that is the only army that is allowed in Moscow. We're not sure how large it is, but it is probably over 100,000 soldiers that are under his personal control. It's a kind of like the Roman emperors had this Praetorian Guard. Putin has his own Praetorian Guard. It's a significant blow, but I myself think it would take more than that to dislodge this guy who's been in power 21 years now.
We have information from the Polish president. Also, American officials have been saying this over the last few hours, that it looks likely that this missile originated from Ukraine and not from Russia, and that it accidentally strayed onto Polish territory, killing 2 Polish citizens. Does this now sort of dampen down, scale down the possibility of any escalation in this war?
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me, Ayushman Singh. Jambal, tragic news coming in from Jammu and